publication against defamation does not apply to the publication by you outside of the proceedings held by the committee on any matters arising from the proceedings. And members, I would like to advise members of the constitutional requirements that members must be physically present within the confines of the Leinster House complex in order to participate in public meetings. I will not permit a member to participate when they are not adhering to this constitutional requirement. Therefore, a member who attempts to participate from outside the precincts will be asked to leave the meeting. In this regard, I would ask any member partaking via MS Teams that prior to making their contribution to the meeting that you confirm that you're on the grounds of Leinster House. Members are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice that you should not criticise or make charges against any person or entity by name or in such a way as to make him or her or it indefinable, or otherwise engage in speech that might be regarded as damning to the good name of the person or entity. Therefore, in your statements are potentially defamatory in relation to any indefinable person or entity, you'll be directed to discontinue your remarks. It's imperative that you comply with such direction. So the agenda for today's meeting is the sustainable management of crayfisheries, and we're joined by the following witnesses representing the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine, Ms Carol Fawcett, Ms Geraldine O'Donovan, representing the Marine Institute, Dr Oliver Tully, representing NIFA, Michael Desmond, John Maneri, Gus O'Donovan, Edward Moore, Michael Hennessy. You also have a number of of NIFA colleagues joining us in the public gallery, and representing the National Inshore Fishermen's Forum is Mr Eamon Dixon and Dr Nicholas Payne. Dr Payne is accompanied by his colleagues Dr Damien Haberlin and Ms Grace Carr. The witnesses' opening statements have been forwarded, have been circulated to members, so rather than read your statements, I will allow you 2 minutes to give a brief synopsis of your statement, and then we can proceed into questions and answers. Now, who is first? It's the Sustainable Management of Fisheries Department of Marine. Ms Carol Fawcett, about 2 minutes, Ms Carol, to do an overview.
Thank you, Chair, and just to say good morning to everyone and to thank you all for the invitation to speak to you today about the issues relating to the sustainable management of crayfish fishing. My name is Carol Forrest. I'm Head of the Inshore and Seafood Climate and Environment Division in the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine, and I'm joined by my colleague Geraldine O'Donovan, who's Head of the Inshore Unit in that division. Just a bit of background on crayfish and the crayfish fishery. I suppose just to say it's a high-value species. It's a bit like lobster, and the stock is sometimes referred to as spiny lobster. It's primarily fished off the southwest coast. There's some smaller fisheries on the west and northwest coast, and the fishery usually occurs around mid-March to December. It's a very important fishery for the livelihoods of the inshore fishers, particularly, as I said, along the southwest coast, and the number of vessels targeting crayfish has been increasing, particularly since 2020. There's an estimated value of landings in 2024 of €3 million. It's primarily fished with tangle nets. They have a large mesh, but the gear can present a threat of bycatch for other marine species, particularly if the deployment is not well managed. The Department has been working to address concerns associated with the use of tangle nets in the fishery and has funded research undertaken by the EMFF, which is the European Maritime Fisheries Fund, and its more recent fund, the European Maritime Fisheries and Aquaculture Fund, for that exact reason. The research has shown how tangle nets used in the fishery can impact on other marine species caught as bycatch, and it's improved data collection, explored alternative fishing methods that mitigate bycatch, and it's looking to support the economic viability of the fishery. The Marine Institute has successfully trialled crayfish pots as a low-impact fishing method, and a larger scale trial is planned for later in the year. In December, the Marine Institute published their report, and I'll let the Marine Institute speak to that more, but just to say from the Department's perspective, we're examining the findings of the study and the recommendations in conjunction with the MI colleagues, and I just want to thank and recognise the crayfish operators who contributed to the study, some of whom are here today. Just to again confirm that we're committed to engaging with fishers and other stakeholders and advancing research on the fishery through the work of the MI to ensure the long-term sustainability of the fishery and protect Ireland's marine biodiversity. We're engaging with the MI and inshore reps on additional management measures that could be introduced, and we will also consider, where relevant, grant aid to support the purchase of more selective gear. But additional management measures will need to be based on scientific evidence and implemented in collaboration with the sector to minimise economic disruption while maximising conservation outcomes. We can take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll now move on to the Marine Institute. Dr. Oliver Tully, 2 minutes. Dr. Tully.
Good here, members of the committee. The Marine Institute welcomes the opportunity today to talk to you about the crayfish project work that we have been engaged in on the South West Coast in collaboration with the fishing industry. The Marine Institute, established under the Marine Institute Act of 1991, is a state agency responsible for providing services in marine research and development that promote economic development, create employment and protects the marine environment. Monitoring of the crayfish fishery or spiny lobster fishery from 2018 to 2025 has deepened our understanding of the fishery, of crayfish stocks and of the two-way interaction between the fishery and wildlife, including the unintended bycatch of endangered and protected species. The project is a real collaboration between fishermen, mainly in North Kerry and the Tralee and Dingle Bay areas. Fishermen were contracted to the Marine Institute to provide data and other services required by the project, including providing vessels and crew for all associated scientific work. The overall principle and objective of the project was to enable the development of a low-impact, economically viable and sustainable fishery for crayfish. Crayfish is important. It's the highest value species per unit weight caught by the Irish fleet. It is, for instance, twice as valuable as lobster, 15 times the value of crab. This is important in that viable incomes can be derived from landing relatively small numbers of crayfish per trip. Landings of crayfish and the number of fishermen targeting crayfish with tangle nets has increased in recent years. It is an important species in the mix of species that inshore fishermen along the Irish coast rely on. The current project confirmed that significant numbers of endangered and protected species are caught in bycatch. It also shows that the bycatch species were different in Tralee and Dingle fleets, although they only fished 20 kilometres from each other. Therefore, it's difficult to extrapolate the project data to tanglenet fisheries on other coasts. GPS tracking of the vessels provided for the first time an accurate estimation of the total number of trips undertaken by the local fleets in Tralee and Dingle. By combining this GPS data and the approximately 800 fishing trips that we observed in collaboration with the fishermen, we were able to estimate total bycatch and assess the significance of this for the species concerned. We also engaged in a number of other projects with the industry. We tagged several endangered species to monitor how they overlap with the fishery and to identify their seasonal migration into and out of Tralee Bay in particular. We have underwater baited video surveys to look at the distribution of these species and of biodiversity generally. We have thousands of crayfish tagged and released during the project to provide information on migration, growth rate and stock size. We've shown a connection between Irish stocks and French stocks of crayfish. We've completed several trials with low-impact fishing gears in outer Tralee Bay and showed how trap design influences catches of crayfish. This work is ongoing and will be extended to the Dingle area in 2026. This work compares catches in equivalent amounts of fishing effort by pots and nets, what the resulting catches would be, the relative input costs, and estimates the relative net income from each gear type. A future viable, sustainable and low-impact pot fishery for crayfish may be possible. The viability of making that transition from nets to pots needs further consideration in collaboration with fishermen.
Thank you, Dr. Tully. We now move to the National Inshore Fishermen's Association, led by Michael Desmond. You have your contributions for about a 2-minute, please, so to give sufficient time for questions and answers later. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Recent recommendations have called for the removal of the crayfish tanglenet fishery following the Marine Institute risk assessment. Inshore fishermen recognise that interaction with protected species must be taken seriously. Many of the vessels involved actively cooperated in data collection and reporting, and without the fishermen's participation, some of the information now before you would not exist. However, NIFA cannot support the immediate removal of another traditional inshore fishery before practical management measures are properly attempted. Closure is not management, it is what happens when management fails. And if you wouldn't mind, Chair, could I share the speaking time with a person that took part in the trial? Sure. Please. Eddie Moore.
Just I want to say there, on behalf of the fishermen, mas féidir lom nom de hogant can our make us occur in old even of Galer, son na history, Bavalum ara gwil Christa so cohach the doing, August has she tacked Queen and of Morgan and Christa so, ni begin Omagin con our cash occur, ni begin out again con our cash occur in old even of Tushka will our sleebaha in Wales. Dus na héan so nómh han ar hánta ó na firas na mná hagain combinaisiúnta híscarí coscósta míle bachas ócraí.
Mae gyda dy cas janta go garage agus go bre.
Go mé magad.
Bekense de go mé shag an na bail agus an cos goléir san vinu anniversary.
Yeah, I should talk to Kane of.
And the Shaw National Inshore Fishermen's Forum, and I understand that Eamon Dixon will be presenting your case. Eamon Dixon.
Chairperson and members of the committee, on behalf of the National Inshore Fishermen's Forum NIF, I would like to sincerely thank you for inviting us to participate in this very important discussion on crayfish fisheries, particularly in relation to the use of tangle nets. Tangle nets for crays has been an important and long established part of the inshore fishing sector for many vessels around our coast. It is common practice in many regions, although activity levels can vary from area to area and from season to season. Over the years, fishermen and women have developed significant skill and experience in this fishery. Advances in electronic equipment and seabed mapping now allows operators to better identify suitable fishing grounds before shooting gear. This not alone improves efficiency, but also helps to reduce any unwanted bycatch by ensuring gear is deployed in appropriate areas. NIF and the Regional Inshore Fisheries Forums RIFs have recognised for some time the strong management practices are essential to ensure the long-term sustainability of any fishery. For this reason, our organisations have been working collaboratively to develop a structured management plan for the future of crayfish tangle netting. As part of this proposal, we are recommending the introduction of a 4-month closed season during the winter period, during which no vessels would target crayfish. This measure would support stock sustainability during a sensitive period, reduce gear soak time as weather conditions outside winter are generally more suitable for hauling, make compliance and monitoring of the closed season significantly easier for the Sea Fisheries Protection Authority, SFPA. There has been broad agreement among NIF and RIF members on these proposed measures, and we are confident that a fully agreed and finalised management document can be completed within the coming weeks. We believe that a complete ban on tangle nets would represent another serious blow to the inshore fishing sector and would be extremely difficult to enforce effectively. A collaborative and managed approach offers a far more practical and sustainable pathway forward. We remain committed to working constructively with the committee, the department and enforcement authorities to ensure a viable and sustainable crayfish fishery for many years to come. Thank you.
Now we move to Dr. Nicholas Payne, Associate Professor of TCD. Dr. Payne.
Yeah, Kahora, thanks, and members of the committee, thanks very much for the invitation to talk about this very important topic. I'm an Associate Professor at Trinity and I have a special interest in the biology and ecology of sharks, rays and skates, and my role here today is to help try to contextualise the findings of the recent report, which I find quite concerning in so much as the estimated numbers of bycatch of critically endangered species such as angel sharks, flapper skate and taupe. Those species are currently assessed by the IUCN as being critically endangered, which they define as species that face an extremely high risk of extinction in the wild. That's across the whole range. Part of the problem and part of the concern about the status of these animals is that sharks and skates and rays, they grow and reproduce very differently to other fish like bony fish, tuna, cod and salmon and that kind of thing. The way that they reproduce, the duration of reproduction makes it very difficult for these animals to recover from over-extraction and impact on the fishery. And that's why we're particularly concerned about these animals based on their biology. There's a range of obligations that Ireland is currently facing, such as the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, OSPAR, EU regulations that potentially raise compliance concerns with how Ireland is continuing to authorise tangle nets in these areas. And rather than trying to really demonise the fishing community here, I think it's really important to acknowledge that fishing is an integral part of Irish culture, and it's really clear that the Irish fishing sector in Ireland is already facing a huge amount of challenges. That's very, very difficult. That, you know, with a series of quota reductions, including livelihoods that impact entire coastal communities, we're very, very aware of that. And also, I want to also acknowledge that it was great to see the level of engagement of the crayfish fishermen in these surveys. So there's really strong engagement for the community. We really do not want to support a top-down approach in imposing another closure of the fishery. But at the same time, we do, I think, need action quite urgently to mitigate the impact of tangle nets on these particularly sensitive bycatch species. The two bycatch monitoring surveys that were undertaken by the Marine Institute span almost a decade. That length of time between data generation and evidence of the problem in terms of bycatch is very, I think, difficult to reconcile with the conservation status of these species. And so that's why we'd like to request consideration of rapid measures where possible to try to address this issue, and in particular, in consultation with the fishermen, try to find ways to support economically a transition to lower impact methods of targeting crayfish where possible. And I think maybe pot fishing has a particular role in that case. Guy Margaret, I'd like to thanks for your...
Thank you all for your presentations. So I'll now move to our members, and the first indicating is Brian McLaughlin, then Jennifer and Charles Ward.
Gura Margaret, Cahirla, and thank you all for your statements today. From reading through the various statements, it's clear to me that a solution is possible here. The language from the Department, Marine Institute, and from yourself, Dr. Payne, is you've all acknowledged the need to work with the fishermen, and you've acknowledged the full participation by the fishermen in the surveys. We wouldn't have this information if they hadn't facilitated this. And also from the two fishing organisations, they've put forward solutions. So I suppose maybe I'll direct my first question to Ms. Forrest. The department, I assume, will oversee all of this in conjunction with the minister. Can you just take us through, obviously the two fishing organisations here have indicated potential solutions. They've made it clear they're opposed to a complete ban, but they're very much open to solutions. Indeed, in the weeks ahead, and the contribution from Mr. Dixon from NIF. So can you just give us a sense of that process, how you intend to deal with that?
I suppose just to say that we have, I suppose, a number of mechanisms. So what we'd generally do is we'd get a proposal from the inshore sector. By the start of it, it would generally come from one of the regional inshore fisheries forums. Then it would go to the NIF. The NIF would agree it if it seems to be something that they can get behind. But in kind of throughout that process, there could be consultation with ourselves and with the MI to see, if there's some issues with the proposal as is put forward. So we are working through that process at the moment. There is a proposal potentially on the table, but it's back with the NIF now to, take another look at it. Gone back to the Regional Inshore Fisheries Forum maybe for slight amendment, and then that's kind of the process of how it would come up to us then, and from there on then we would examine it and take appropriate steps as we would do for any change to policy from therein. But it's something, I suppose I would just say, it's not a quick fix in a couple of weeks. There's potentially, there's a lot involved here, and we'd have to get evidence, we'd have to put everything before the Minister to make a decision on it.
Yeah, and it's fair to say from, as I said, that and this is really important, that when we're dealing with conservation measures, we're dealing in partnership with the fishermen who fish those grounds. So maybe just invite both NIFA and NIF to just give a sense of the proposals that you have for resolving this. Yeah, Mr. Dixon first, yeah.
Sure. And I completely agree with Carol, and obviously have to work with her to get any of these proposals brought to IMG. I think is the board or the body that takes them up after they're approved at NIF level. But to be fair, this crayfish one we've been working on for a good while. It has gone back and over, and it's not always easy to get complete buy-in from every fisherman in the country. It's difficult enough, so we have to go to each of the rifts and stuff. We've had to do that once, a couple of times, but we are very close to having it being finalised. I think, in fairness, it came from the Southwest Rift to begin with as well, but we're very close to it. I think we have general agreement from all of the different rifts at the moment, so it's just a matter of getting it back to an IF meeting, having it agreed. Then obviously we have to pass it over, as Carol said, to her department, and for them I don't know what the time frame is involved, but the time frame there would be on their side. From our side, from the industry side, I would say that we could have that ready for our next NIF meeting, to be honest, agreed by all of the different risks.
Yeah.
Can I just take that as well, on behalf of NIFA? I'm also the chair of the Southwest Rift, where this proposal actually originated, and come from the Southwest Rift nearly a year ago. So I just want to point that out, because here in this, I want to point that fishermen have been proactive rather than reactive. This proposal has come out prior to any reports being launched. Fishermen are looking for management to be brought in here, and the proposal at our last meeting, the fishermen feel that they wanted to actually strengthen the proposal. The original proposal, as Eamon has said there, is with regard to the season, and the season being discussed is from the 15th of December to the 2nd of April. We just didn't want to go at Fool's Day. So the 2nd of April, so that's a substantial amount of a season that's actually closed. And the reason we're going with that is because the loss of every other fishery to us, we have felt that fishermen had no other option. When they lost the pollock fishery, guys actually went away and they actually decided that they were going to try to fish cranes. They had no other form of income, so they were fishing cranes for the 12 months of the year. So these guys have actually come forward and decided amongst themselves that, yeah, this is what they want to do. But they've also strengthened the proposal now to commit into a soak time. And in my opinion, as a person that has been involved in this fishery since its beginning, 40 odd years at it, both pot fishery and the net fishery, soak time is key to any solution to any problem that's with tangle net fisheries in the water.
Okay. Anybody else in the NIFA?
Is there 1 minute left? Anybody else want to respond?
If I could just point out some of the discrepancies in the report, if that's all right. I mean, taupe, shark being counted as an endangered species. No, it's not, in the northeast Atlantic. That's factually untrue. The way it's been worded, people make out, that these skate have been killed. 95% of our bycatchers released alive. That's not written in anywhere in the report. Like tangle nets in the Environmental Chamber of Horrors is regarded as a bad thing. The purpose of a tangle net is to keep the fish alive, that they don't get meshed, they're not choked. We release these fish alive. The dead crayfish is no good to us. They have to be salt alive. That's the whole purpose of a tangle net, is to, keep them alive. They're not like choked inside it. None of that is written in it. And there's an awful lot like I think it's 78 times the word estimate is written in the report. Science is supposed to be, the definition of the word science is observation based on facts. So how, if you have 78 estimates inside in the report, where's the facts in that? That's not science. Like, that's the problem we have with it.
Okay, thanks, Deputy Whitmore.
Thanks, Chair. Before we come in, I'm just wondering whether we should give Oliver Tully an opportunity to come back, because
An opportunity.
but they were quite.
Well, I want to bribe him.
Well, everybody's got questions, so everybody
Yeah.
can ask whatever questions they want.
Ask him the same question and get a reply.
Well, I'm just going to start first. I just want to say thank you for coming in today, and I do think it's really important that there's such representation from the insurance sector here. Obviously, any solution to this will have to be done with yourselves, right? Because you're on the ground, you're the ones who are going to be essentially managing this on behalf of the department through your practices. So I think that's really important. And I do also want to thank Edward and his colleagues for participating in the survey, because I know it's a very difficult thing to participate in a survey when you're not sure what the outcomes of that will be for your own business, essentially. And look, it is the case that the fishermen are operating, like you are operating within the regime that's there. You know, tangle nets are allowed. There's very few, if any, restrictions on them. And so, you know, you're just operating your business within the current structures. And I suppose it's up to the department to regulate that. Ms. Forrest, my question really to you then, you spoke about that this, I'm really pleased that there's work underway at the moment to come up with a management plan or some sort of management system, but you said it's not going to be a quick fix, and that anything that happens needs to be based on evidence. I'll just go back through. In 2005, BIM acknowledged the significant bycatch losses from tangle nets. In 2012, they did similarly. In 2017 to 2020, the Marine Institute gathered information on tangle nets and the impact of bycatch on that, and they recommended at that point transitioning the fishery back to pots. There was then a public consultation in 2021. There has been another Marine Institute report, 2021 to 2024, which I will go into the details here. There has been a lot of work over many, many years. I think it has always been known that there's a problem with this fishery and the impact potentially it has on the particularly vulnerable and protected species. And I just want to briefly go through. So the latest report from the Marine Institute estimated, and I take your point about the estimation, Michael, but that is how, you know, they're not going to be able to go out and calculate absolutely every single species. That's just not going to be possible. So this is, you know, scientifically accurate. 1,161 grey seals, which are a protected species. And they specified that the seal population in the Blasket Island, which is in a national park, a national marine park, and a special area conservation, could not sustain this level of mortality. They estimated 81 angel sharks were caught. It is a critically endangered species globally. In fact, Ireland is one of the few areas where this species is now found, so there is responsibility on us to protect it. An estimated 1,712 critically endangered flapper skate, 2 critically endangered white skate, endangered undulate ray, taupe, which are endangered in other areas, and I've seen footage of basking shark caught in these nets. So can I just ask you, what have you been doing for the last 10, 15 years? The problem has been there. You're still issuing licences from it. You said that the amount, the fishing effort has increased substantially since 2020. There is responsibility on us, and we're obliged under so many different marine statutes to actually protect these species. I'm just wondering, why have you been giving out, issuing licenses? Why have you not brought in any management plans to date?
So I suppose just to say in terms of licences, I guess there might be a conception there that a perception out there that licences are issued for tangle net fishing. Licences, I suppose, are issued by the licensing authority, and they can have certain area, gear, you know, size restrictions, but there aren't specific licences issued for boats to, I suppose, participate in a tangle net fishery using tangle nets, just, I suppose, to clarify that piece. In terms of I suppose, what's gone on over the last, number of years, we've been aware that there are issues around bycatch, but I suppose it's about kind of coming together, getting the science in place fully, and that takes a long period of time. We've been funding the MI. We've had 2, I suppose, funded projects under the MI. The first one took place under the last Seafood Development Programme, which was under the European Maritime Fisheries Fund. We've had a more recent one, which took place, and the results of which were published last December. I suppose, the findings of that more recent one, as they're set out, are much starker, I suppose, than what we had seen before. But just to say, that we are fully engaged on this. We engage with the industry through the processes I mentioned already to Deputy McLaughlin, and the industry, as they said themselves, acknowledge this, and they're looking for a way forward, and we're available to facilitate that. But we would have to have it, based on the evidence, and we would have to have the buy-in from the industry. That's very important, because you want to have a situation where you can have an economically viable fishery while still meeting any conservation objectives. And just to say, in respect, and maybe Ollie might want to come in a bit more on this, but just in respect of bycatch, there are certain measures in place that we would have to comply with coming forward. So under the nature restoration law, for example, we're going to have to do something to try and preserve angel shark, for example, or I think white skate is maybe mentioned in that as well. So we're kind of aware that there's things coming, but it's been a moving space,
So what I would say is that, like, there are already obligations. We don't need to look to the nature restoration law to understand what our obligations are to protect these species. We already have signed up to things. I'm just wondering, why haven't you used any fisheries Natura declarations to deal with this issue in a precautionary measure?
Georgine, do you want to take?
Thank you, Deputy Whitmore. I might just come in there on that. In terms of fisheries Natura declarations, as you rightly say, there's the grey seal, for example, is protected in the baskets, and in terms of that, there is a netting ban in that area as it is since 2006. You're quite correct in that the legal instrument to bring in, I suppose, some further initiatives in terms of the protection of grey seal would be through a fisheries Natura declaration, but it's finding as well the appropriate area, the appropriate closed area. We're very aware that with grey seal, although it is absolutely a protected species under the Natura 2000, it's also in a favourable status as well in terms of the National Parks and Wildlife reports under Article 17.
But just on that, I mean, both Marine Institute reports have both said, so the one from 2014 to 2020 and the recent one, have said that the population in the Blasket Islands will not be able to sustain. And that isn't within a national park, right? So this isn't just, so I think, like, the evidence has been there and you haven't done anything with it from what I can see.
A brief response. Time is...
And what I would say is that certainly we can look at what an area and extending a fisheries Natura declaration would look like and how spatially it would look in terms of the grey seal hull outside.
Ms. Carr for a brief response.
Thank you. Just to come in quickly there on the fisheries Natura declarations. These are supposed to be put in place to manage any fishery that could be damaging to protected species or protected habitats, and this is through the EU Habitats Directive. As far as I'm aware, I don't think there's a net closure around the Blaskets. There is a net closure in the Tralee Bay area, but the majority of the bycatch of grey seals was around the Blasket Islands. And just to point out as well that last year there were no fisheries Natura declarations that were put in place. Since 2019, there have only been 4, and altogether for the whole island of Ireland, there's actually only 11 of these. And some of them only have minimal measures, or they're quite small in areas. And as well as that, there's management plans that are being proposed by the fishing industry. I'm aware of one in the northeast Irish Sea for the razor clam fishery, and the fishermen have actually put this plan together and they've submitted it through the proper channels, and then they don't hear anything back from the department about it. And I think this happens around the island as well. So the fact that we're not putting in these management plans and we're not putting in these fisheries natura declarations, it's not only failing the environment, but it's also failing the fishing industry as well. With the last Article 17 report, it showed that 12 out of 14 marine habitats were in bad or unfavourable condition, and there are other pressures on them like pollution and runoff from the land, but one of the main pressures identified was fishing pressure as well. And then this negatively impacts the fishing industry because it's been shown globally, there's many different reports that I can send on to you, that if there are proper conservation measures put in certain areas, these areas then turn into fisheries recovery zones basically, and fish are able to grow bigger and reproduce more, and then this has a positive impact on the industry where they can catch less with less fishing effort and hopefully get more for their catch as well because fish are bigger and healthier. So it doesn't happen overnight. It does take a long time, but Ireland's very far behind in this. We should have been putting these measures in place decades ago and we'd be in a very different situation now. So I think we do really need to look at how management plans and FNDs are put in place in Ireland.
Okay, if you mentioned about having reports, and if you wish to share them with us, the Secretarial will arrange that they will be sent to our members. Now, Deputy Ward.
Okay, so I'll get right into it. So this is for Ms Foster. The Department ran a public consultation in 2021 to gather views on possible conservation measures. Why have the findings not yet been published, and do you plan on publishing them in the future?
I suppose just to say at the time the public consultation was run kind of in autumn, in or around the autumn period of 2021. After the public consultation process ends, there's obviously a period where we need to do a bit of analysis on the findings. That kind of took place into 2022. And I suppose really at that stage the MI, the most recent MI project had kicked off. Plus on top of that there was kind of progress being made in respect of the MPA legislation. We were moving towards the publication in 2021 on the general heads of scheme for that bill. So because there was a lot of developments in that area, you know, the decision was taken to, I suppose, not publish the results of the consultation at that time, just waiting to see what would happen with each of those two developments. As you probably are aware, the MPA legislation is now what's being looked at is that it would be folded into the Marine or the Maritime Area Planning Act, and then, you know, as you're aware as well, that the recent publication of the MI report has just taken place. So we're kind of, I guess, just to say in terms of the publication of the results of the consultation, they're available. We've completed our report on them. They just haven't been published and put up online. And just, you know, there's been a passage of time, so we could publish them. It would just be we'd have to caveat that, you know, there has been obviously a significant period of time since the public consultation took place. And
is there a plan to publish this? Is there a plan in the near future to publish this, or no?
Well, we can look at it. We haven't, I suppose, come to that decision yet.
Okay, thanks. This is for Nifa now. I'll go into this. What are the results of low-impact gear trials, and could you modernise the pot to design to help the fishermen transition back without big losses? Can that be done? And could the Marine Institute also answer that question? I'll let yourself answer that.
Thanks. We participated in the pot trials over the last number of years, and we've tried 4 or 5 different kinds of pots with barrier pots to try and keep the cray in the pot. Our main trouble is the pots that we always traditionally use. The cray will go into the pot, but he jumps out again. They won't stay inside. So we tried it August, September. The weather was very fine. It was fairly successful, but the weather was very fine in shallow water, enclosed, where there is no net fishing anyway. So the trouble is, if you stop your nets and every boat gets, say, 200 pots each, hauls them 3 times a day, we have 5 or 6 netting boats in our area. That is, say, 600 pots a day per boat, 5 boats. 3,000 pots. So you're on 3,000 pots a day in, say, 3 or 4 square miles. They won't work in deep water, that's the trouble. So you have fishing for 4 or 5 months, or 4 or 5 weeks a year, and that's it. So,
And I want the Marine Institute to also answer that too, please.
Thank you. Yeah, as Michael said, we've been undertaking trials in the Fianna and Tralee area for the last number of years. We've looked at different pot designs to make them as efficient as possible and try and increase the catch rate to ensure, to get as economically as viable an income from every pothole. We've tried to quantify the income or the value of the catch per pothole in different design pots. Last year we had some successful trials, as Michael has explained, in certain times of the year. Good weather is important to have in that context. So we need to do further work and extend the trials into different conditions, into different water depths and into different geographic areas to ensure that they may work. Now, there are fishermen using pots commercially for crayfish in Ireland, not necessarily in the project area that we are working in, but there are examples where they are used commercially at the moment.
Depth is an issue. So when you're dealing with depth, the pots don't work. That's what we're seeing.
We don't know that from the trials, no.
Okay, right. So I'll ask the Marine Institute. I'll come back to you on this. The proposed grants for selective crayfishing gear, is it enough to aid your members? And this is for NIFA. And what other supports do the industry need to do generally to support you going forward?
I don't think you can get grants to get fishing gear.
Nothing.
But if it's because it would increase fishing effort. But could I just say, just before me, I have the Marine Institute report. I have the opening statement from the Trinity College, UCC, etc. I have the most up-to-date aerial Irish Sea survey, and I have a report from the Marine Institute done into skates and rays, etc. And we're talking here. I was delighted here. Ms. Forrest said that DAFM will make recommendations based on scientific data, because we have a Marine Institute report that uses the word possibly 78 times, and in the second page of it, it says neither Marine Institute nor the author accepts any responsibility whatsoever for loss or damages occasioned or claimed to have been occasioned in part or in full as a consequence of any person acting or refraining as a result of a matter contained in this publication. So they don't stand over their own work. We have Trinity College and UCC here in their opening statement are implying that 532 critically endangered taupe sharks were caught. And if they had read the report, the Marine Institute's own report here, I have it here somewhere, that taupe are an endangered species, except in the Northeast Atlantic. Why would the Marine Institute put down something that starts out that taupe are critically endangered, but then follow by saying, but not in the area surveyed? Taupe are not an endangered species in the Northeast Atlantic. That's in the Marine Institute report. The Marine Institute report for this most up-to-date one is talking about seal surveys in 2012. The aerial Irish Sea survey, the most up-to-date one, is 2024, where it says the grey seal population in Ireland has increased by around 190% since 2003. So that, to me, doesn't sound like a population in trouble. We have a page from the Marine Institute report into Hillaz and Mobranch fish in Tralee Bay, and the ICES advice on angel sharks is any incidental bycatch should not be landed but returned to sea, as they are likely to have a high survivability rate. That's from ICES. That's the gold standard for science on fish. So what we as fishermen would firstly ask is to deal with data, not possibly maybe. Let's get the data first, and then all sit around and try and make educated assumptions. But to have reports that base one part of it on 2012, when you have 2024 data, we have ICES saying that angel sharks have a high survivability. We have another opening statement that said that critically endangered taupe sharks are affected when they are not critically endangered in the area we're talking about. So we need to have factual data, not just hearsay and sound bites for whatever reason. Let's start with the data first, is what us as fishermen, all the fishermen in the gallery here today have provided data, but then that data is used by others for whichever gain, and the data should be presented as such.
Thank you. Are there other members who want to Senator Manus-Boyle?
Hello everybody, and thank you all for coming in. The mortality rate for the crayfish and the Marine Institute report. My question is, why is there no mortality rate for endangered species like skate and ray?
We estimate the mortality rate of crayfish by asking fishermen to report what is dead and what is alive in the catch when they bring it on board deck. Now, it is less easy to do that for skates and rays and angel shark, even though they may be. And we do acknowledge in the report that mortality does not always occur, but that we don't know the rate of survival post-release when those fish are released again. So we don't assume 100% mortality. We acknowledge there's some survival. In fact, we have successfully tagged angel shark and released them from fish caught in tangle nets, and we show subsequent survival. The problem really is for species like angel shark, the tolerable or sustainable bycatch level is really zero because they're so critically endangered. So there's an unknown there in terms of an ongoing mortality that might be happening due to bycatch in gears like tangle nets. I think survivability is probably higher in otter trawls or gears which are towed and which are hauled quickly, but long soak times for tangle nets may result in higher mortality rates.
Maybe.
Yeah, thanks very much for the good questions and comments. I mean, I guess firstly on the critically endangered status of type, so they are globally classified in that way. I think it kind of emphasises the point that Ireland is actually one of the last remaining strongholds for some of these species. So like for flapper skate, for angel sharks, and even for type, we are renowned as being a place where you can still find these species. But when you look more broadly, they are critically endangered globally, and so I think that makes it more important actually that we protect them here where we can still see them. On the bycatch mortality, yeah, it's an unknown. It's particularly difficult to get data from species that are critically endangered because you can't do experiments at, you know, what are their mortality rates with much accuracy. What I would say though is that looking across species in lots of different types of net, particularly things like gill nets, long soak times can be one of the main factors that causes higher mortality rates. And I guess the other thing that's really important too, an animal surviving on deck when it's being released doesn't mean that it's going to survive subsequently. A lot of these kind of animals can suffer injuries that might not look like major injuries, but they can suffer from infection, they can suffer from disease caused by catch, so that releasing them alive doesn't mean that necessarily they're going to survive. Often mortality happens days and days or sometimes weeks after capture. It's very difficult to account for that.
Maybe maybe some years coming in this, Eamon?
Yeah, just one, and it's only just a personal thought at the moment, but like, and I completely accept what Mr. Payne is saying, but at the same time, if Ireland is one of the areas where there's still a really good high level of those species at the moment, then does that not really indicate that we're actually doing something right as a fishing industry and have been doing it? If they're disappearing in other parts of the world, they wouldn't be here in those kind of numbers if what we were doing was supposed to be as detrimental to them as we're kind of have here today. So I think that's a very important point to keep in mind. And as I said earlier, we're actually trying to actually improve what we do even further again. So I think that's a very important point.
You come in, please.
If I can come in there through the chair. I just heard the word spoken there, unknown. If we can speak about what is known, okay? I participated in this fishery or this survey from the beginning to end. If my data, and it's freely available, if anybody wants to see it, I'll gladly produce it. My data from the start to finish, all right, and the soak time as to which my son isn't there in the gallery, can also prove that my soak time, all right, has 0 bycatch. All right, I'm not unique in the way I fish. Others do the same. Others in the room. Why does the report not show my data instead of putting my data in with all the other data and makes my data completely irrelevant? That's point number one. And number two, a point I'd like to make, and it's extremely close to my heart, is that since this word ban, and ban is the word I see used, I don't see anything in the line of management. All I've seen is ban. Since this word ban has come out, okay, this entire debacle that we're sitting in front of here today, and I would use the word debacle because it's been trialled out in social media. Every fisherman inside in this room, men sitting up there in that gallery, all right, have been called every kind of a name under the sun on social media. From 2 weeks ago today, I was up to here in water, walking around a beach, physically carrying dolphins back into the water, as was my son. Went away, we got a boat, we brought the dolphins back in, we put them back in the water. But by the time we got home, a certain group had up on Facebook, all right, that fishermen are killing dolphins, okay? A ban is needed on tangle nets. That's the very same day that we spent 4.5 hours walking around freezing water. That's not the first day we've done that, okay? But fishermen having to face this, and this trial by media, okay? And there are people in this room, I don't want to name any names, but I've spoken with one individual last Sunday for 1 hour and 40 minutes, and by the time I got off the phone, there was another post with the word ban on social media a half an hour later again.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I don't think that this is fair on fishermen, okay? We wouldn't be having this discussion if fishermen weren't in this room. Management is the word that should be used here, not the word ban, okay? Ban, the definition of a ban is when management has failed. Management hasn't even been discussed here, and the only ones discussing management here and the only ones pushing for management here are fishermen.
Just,
Senator,
just 15 seconds. Michael, you talked about the pot this is trying to develop. Is there a pot in your that you think would work? Like, it seems to be that this has been pushed away from and transition into these pots. But I mean, if the pot won't work, what's the point in using them?
Standard default does work in, like I said, favourable conditions, fine weather during the summer. But the trouble is, if you take the nets out of the equation and just fish pots, like I said, it's a small enough area that you would be working the pots. You can't really work them in deep water. Number one, you're not going to be able to keep crew. Like, you're looking at maybe getting 4 or 5 weeks of the year, fine weather. You're going to end up going fishing on your own, trying to put in 200 pots, which are once and a half the size of a lobster pot. It's dangerous. You can't leave them out in swell. You have to bring them up Tralee Bay or bring them up Brandon Bay for a bit of shelter. It's not really feasible. Like, there's too much. It's too dangerous, number one, like, and number two, it's not going to pay. That's the trouble, like, it just won't pay us.
Can I just come in on that there? The one problem with the pot fishery for the crayfish that nobody seems to be giving any thought to is we already have a pot fishery that the whole inshore industry is after being squeezed into for crab, lobster, shrimp. Every other opportunity is gone. So now we have a fishery that does not use pots. It uses another form of low impact gear with a big mesh, doesn't kill any juvenile fish, it's soft on the seabed, it doesn't create any damage to the sea floor, but yet that method of fishing is being demonised. If that is banned, the only result that'll have is it'll push more operators into the crab, the lobster, the shrimp, and you know, it'll move effort from one place to another. It won't fix anything. All it's going to do is relocate effort.
Thank you. Members? Hold on, are there any other members? Could I just ask the question about the tangle nets? And the discussion here today brings me back 40 years when I handled as many fish as anybody ever handled with the bare hands, whether it was crayfish or lobster at the time. But it's interesting to hear about what some say might be the damage that tangle nets are doing. Others would say no, it's not, that they're fishing in a very sustainable way. And of course, management is important. Who are fishing, or where are big eye pots being fished? Or is that what you're talking about developing now?
That's a fishery I've been part of since before the net fishing actually took off really in our area. that net fishery started back in the 70s. It's gone on with, well, say 79, 80, 81, 82, 83. That's when it really took off. It started with an old nylon type net that was covered in tar, had to be soaked on roofs for 24 hours before it was even handled because of the tar that was on it. That progressed to monofilament net. But the pot fishery in question, I'm fourth generation fisherman. My son is up there, his fifth generation. I hope to God he actually gets the opportunity to continue. That pot fishery, all right, our forefathers used it. All right, I don't think they were extremely clever fishermen. I don't think the wheel needs to be invented here. The fishery is there, but as the point Gus has made here, all right, is that the guys that are actually involved in the fishery at the moment, all right, are under massive pressure. That's another management plan that we have trying to put forward with a number of years with regard to a pot fishery. It's ongoing for the last 4 years now at this stage. So if we're going to put extra effort in, it doesn't matter what pot type you're going to use. A pot is not specific to crayfish. It's also going to catch brown crab. It's going to catch spider crab. It's going to catch lobster. Okay, so that's removing fish from the existing fishery that's there at the moment, irrelevant of what fishery you're going to use. But with regard to the pot, the wheel doesn't have to be reinvented. The type of pot that was used back by our forefathers, who, in my opinion, were probably the most, they were probably the best fishermen around. They didn't get to where they were because they don't have the technology that we have now inside in boats. So that type of fishery has been around forever.
Thanks for that explanation. Can anybody establish whether the bycatch of skate or rays or angled shark, can you establish, what is the bycatch of these? Are they in the tangle nets, and then can you release them, or what happens?
We're actually the boat that tagged the 2 inch stacks. It was the first time it was ever done for Ireland. I thought it was a great thing, but I thought they could prove that we can mind them. One of the tags, he went off, was it 200 miles off the shore? 200 nautical miles off the shore. Tag went off. It was a great sign. I mean, I've never seen a dead intershack. Anytime we get them in, they're in and out of the boat 2-3 minutes, and you see them swimming away. I have pictures on my phone, videos on my phone. We probably get 3 or 4 every year, and they all go back alive.
So is there a perception that the fishing of tangle nets, is that the perception?
Yeah.
Not be the fact
Sorry.
And who can prove that? Is there anybody here who can prove that they are doing serious damage to the endangered species? And I come from the west coast of Ireland, Donegal, involved in the fishing for a long time, down from North Mayo, buying all of those fish up to the very north. But I also realise that there's another endangered species, and that's the fishermen themselves. So, we have to find a balance, and I think the balance in all this is a proper management in order to ensure that there's a sustainable fishery, because it's no good to you if it's not sustainable. A 1 year fishery doesn't provide funding for you, your families for years, so you have to do it from year to year. So there's a lot of factors to be taken into consideration, and I understand that NAIFA has management plans ready to go, and hopefully they will be available to us soon. And when they are, would you just ensure that we as members or the Secretariat would be forwarded a copy, that we can educate ourselves more fully into the advantages or disadvantage? Do you want to respond?
Yeah, there was actually an independent ecologist. He was on Radio Kerry there a few weeks ago, and I actually rang him and I tried to explain best way I could about our fishery, that it's not as black and white as it's saying on the report, and I actually offered to carry him out and do a couple of trips on board my boat. I actually even told him I'd put him up and everything, because we've nothing to hide. That's the trouble. We wouldn't be participating in these things if we're guilty of something. I actually offered I'd take him out for 2 or 3 days. I'd put him up, feed him the whole shebang, and show him. He said he'd take me up on this,
Listen.
The data is there from I can only speak from my own side, but the data is there and the proof is there that if you work with a soak time, all right, and given that the proposals are there from fishermen with regard to a season, okay, this man says here that the most of his angel shark that he caught were early part of the year. So if you're going to close a fishery from December to April, that's a massive thing to do, okay? Now, again, this is coming from fishermen themselves. They're willing to take this all right? You have a group here in the room here. There's 14 here from NIFA. All right. There's Deputy McGuinness or Deputy Manus Boyle said in the last JOC meeting here about a young fisherman in Donegal, and that he wouldn't be going back fishing the following day. There's 4 young members of NIFA up here from 21 years of age to 30. They're here trying to secure their future. All right, I'm not here fighting for myself or arguing for myself or anybody else, and neither are these. You can see the age that's here in front of you. It's for these young people here. We're trying to create a future.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other members, I think, Jennifer, you wanted to...
John wanted to come in.
Just make it. I want to give every...
I don't think you were here at the last time we were in here, but one of the problems we brought up in Manus, and Manus can attest to this, we brought up the problem we're not going to have enough bait for our crab and lobster fishery this year. We won't have bait for crayfish pots. Fishermen on their own back have suggested, and the Minister is going to sign off on a 10mm increase in the brown crab landing size for this year that is going to reduce our landings by 20%. That's what fishermen have proposed and asked for themselves off their own backs. So at the moment we can't take any more cuts, and if people here want to take the pressure off the crayfish, it can be done. It can be done at the stroke of a pen. We've lost more fisheries. We've lost access to fisheries. We've lost access to national quota. Give us back what we had already, and that'll immediately take pressure off fisheries instead of trying to vilify fishermen and just hammer them deeper and harder into the ground. Look for solutions. There's some people in, I'm not saying in the room here today, but from environmentalist, from more extreme environmental side of things, if there's not a problem, they have nothing to fight for if everything's okay. And a lot of this, I believe, has been sensationalised for others' own gain.
Okay, before I take in Deputy Maxwell, he hasn't been in already.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Look, someone from an inland county and learning about the fishing. So, question: a tangle net. So, I take it the tangle net is put out in the water. Does it stand up in the water? Is it on the seabed? And you know, someone mentioned the opening is the mesh is big, so it allows the juvenile fish to run through. And I take it because it's called a tangle net, the lobster comes along and gets tangled up in it. Is that the name? I'm a bit simplistic in that. So it's the bigger species that can possibly get caught in the net. But does the net stand up off the seabed, or does the net lie on the seabed? It's not a bag as such we see behind the trawler pulling in. No.
It's a length of net. All right. The meshes for crayfish, particularly, the mesh size can vary. It can go up to 16-inch mesh. The mesh that's normally used is 10.5 inches. So that's 10.5 inches by 10.5 inches by 10.5 inches by 10.5 inches. Okay? So that's a 10.5-inch mesh. So that's quite big. Smaller fish swim through it. At time you will get a pollock. You will get stuff like that, because the ground that's specifically used on is, to explain, it's ground that starts at maybe 30 fathoms of water and goes up to 3 fathoms, and there's 6 feet in each fathom. So it's like you're shooting nets up and down a church steeple. Okay, crayfish predominantly live on the side of cliffs. And to explain, so you're targeting to put the net down in that specific area. A net will possibly stand 3 feet off the bottom. Okay. Because we use only a rope as buoyancy for the top part, that enables the net to rise just enough that the height of a crayfish can actually walk through. So, and just in regard to bycatch, no fisherman gets up in the morning, goes to sea to catch something that's of zero monetary value to him. Okay?
Yeah.
Life is hard enough, it's long enough, all right, without having to put in extra work for something that you ain't going to get paid for.
Okay.
So
you want to respond to Deputy Maxwell?
Yeah. Yes, I'd just like to come in on a few points around just conservation objectives and how to help the fishing industry as well. So we have got a lot of data showing that unfortunately tangle nets are damaging to critically endangered species, and there's no level of bycatch that is safe for critically endangered species. And I do want to acknowledge what Eddie said as well. We all know that this is accidental bycatch. There's no fishermen going out there trying to catch critically endangered species. But unfortunately, these species, they move around the coast of Ireland, and they're moving into the cray fishery ground, and that's how they're getting caught in these nets. And unfortunately, with some of the management measures that have been suggested, like limiting the soak time, that would be something that would be very hard to monitor, and through no fault of the fishermen themselves, because they mightn't be able to get out to get the nets if there's unexpected bad weather. For personal reasons, health issues, they can't get out, and then before you know it, the nets are in the water for a week or more again. And some of my colleagues can speak on the post-mortality rate of sharks and rays. The longer the soak time, the rate of mortality would be higher. And with seasonal closures as well, going by the data that was in the report, the data was only collected between April and October, I think it was. So having a closure over winter wouldn't actually impact the bycatch for the period that's been recorded. And that's why we're asking for the nets to be prohibited and for there to be a switch over to pot fishing. But we do know that there needs to be continued engagement with this, because there are issues around pot fishing as well. But this also isn't a new issue. There was a proposal in 2020 by the Marine Institute to close the cray fishery for 3 years to allow the numbers to replenish, and then to have a wider ban on the tangle nets after that. And then there was the public consultation after that too. But we do want to acknowledge as well, we know that the fishermen collected this data, like they went out and got it, and that's something that needs to be appreciated and remembered going into the future as well, because we need all the help we can get, and we need to find out as much as we can about the marine environment. And it is all of our natural heritage, it's all of our responsibility to protect it. So if fishing communities are having to change their fishing methods to protect it, then they should absolutely be getting the financial supports in order to do that. And as well as financial supports, there's other measures that the government can take, and have not done so yet, to support the fishing and the inshore fishing industry and the environment. Like an income support scheme for them as well. We would be supportive of that. There's lots of other industries in Ireland that get income support, so why not the inshore fishermen and also the island fishermen as well, to protect the cultural heritage. And a big issue that we see as well for the environment and for the inshore fleet is the issue around national quota allocation. So at the moment there's 80 to 90% of the pelagic quota that's given to a small handful of bigger boats, and the rest of the inshore fleet and the island fishing communities are left with a small amount. And some people might be saying it's all well and good me talking about this. I'm not a fisherwoman and it doesn't impact my income, but it is an environmental issue as well, and it's also a social justice issue. Like, the government should be prioritising that everybody has got fair access to opportunities, to resources, and in this case quota. And in regards to the environment, it would have huge benefits to it. A lot of tangle net fishermen are saying if tangle nets were taken off them, they don't have anything else to go into. While if they were getting better quota allocation, they would be able to do that, and there wouldn't be this reliance on certain fishing methods or pressure on certain species. So this has been called for years. It's not a new thing. And I know there's been big quota cuts at EU level there before Christmas, but this is something that people have been asking for a long time. So in order to support...
I'm sorry, but I'm watching the clock and I have to...
Oh, sorry, no worries.
You don't come up for air at all.
Sorry, just trying to get the points in, but that was me.
Well, you've done them.
I think
just when you're talking to them, you're...
I think Edward wanted back in there and that to answer me a question.
Tully, Marine Institute.
Thank you. Very briefly, in reference to what we proposed in December 2020, in December 2020 we went to and published a prior information notice to tender. In other words, we had full intention of going to public procurement to procure the services of fishermen into this project. Before we did that, we published a prior information notice which allows and enables people to respond to ideas that we were going to put in the tender, and that's why we did that. So we had proposed various things in discussion with fishermen, and after we collated all of that, we then went to public tender, having taken into account what was said in the prior information notice and the submissions to that prior information notice.
Thanks for your brief response. And speaking of income support, you're aware that there's a task force at the moment, and I understand that a number of you are represented on that, and I'm sure you'll make your case there on the task force forum as well as you've done it here. Now we have to have committed to Jennifer for a brief question, Jennifer, and then Deputy. Oh, sorry. Do you mind Deputy Cahill hasn't been in already?
Oh, no, that's grand, yeah.
Good Mahagat Cahirlock, and I too would like to welcome all our guests today and thank you for your presentations. Just to say, Chair, that at pretty much every meeting we have or we hold, we discuss the survival of the fishing industry. the survival of coastal communities, the survival of fishermen and fisherwomen. And I suppose, sadly, today is no different. I'm glad to hear the word sustainability being mentioned, management, and to hear about working together. Otherwise, we will not survive, or the industry will not survive. It's just, I think it's black and white. Cathaoirleach, I believe the importance of data cannot be emphasised strongly enough, and I think until such time as we get all factual data, we, as a committee, we can't make any informed decision. I suppose it's very important to say that it's in all our interests that the industry is sustainable, and until we have, as I mentioned, all the data in front of us, we're going nowhere. And I would ask that, you know, call on all parties to give us the up-to-date data as soon as possible, and we invite all our guests back in. Thank you.
Thank you. So, no questions, but I know Niamh will have a report within the next number of weeks, and hopefully it could be helpful. Now, we've got to you, Jennifer.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just, am I not allowed to talk now? I'm taking some guidance from Grace on it, and we'll keep on. I'll keep on talking at it. But I think I'm listening to what's been said, and sometimes I think we're all on the same page, right? That there needs to be management, that we recognise that there's an issue, and then I'm not sure whether there is the recognition that there is a problem. So I just want confirmation. Like, do you recognise that there is a problem with tangle nets? Or do you think actually the tangle net fishery is fine, that there's no issue with bycatch? Because if that's the case, then we are miles apart. Like, what you're seeing and what's being represented is miles apart.
Like, to say that there's an issue with tangle nets, I wouldn't think was correct. Okay. To say that the tangle net fishery needs management, and mostly management, it needs a closed season, it needs controlled soak times, X, Y, and Z. It needs a limit on the amount of gear or whatever a fella can work to control the soak times. It's not right to say that there's a problem with tangle nets, especially when you're looking at it in regards to one report for southwest of Ireland for 2 small bays, and the same gear is used countrywide for several different fisheries. Like, you've turbot, monk, race, all these fisheries are used the same gear. So it's wrong for us to come out and say that there's just a problem with tangle nets. Maybe say there's a problem with the bycatch of endangered angel sharks in Tralee Bay, but I don't think you could say, and again, I don't know, could I quite agree with that statement because of all the issues surrounding the data, and guys aren't happy with it, and they're not happy with how it was presented, but I don't think you could say, that's it, there's an issue around tangle nets.
Okay. And then just on that, because I think it just would be good, just Chair, if possible, to just dig into this a little bit more, because Edward, you were talking about your father and how him and his neighbours and other fishermen would have, and they were the best fishermen ever, and they all use pots. So really, the traditional fishery for crayfish is a pot fishery, and I'm just looking at the figures. Like, there was more than twice the amount of crayfish being caught through a pot fishery in the 1970s before the tangle nets came in. Do you think that it's possible to go back to that? Because it seemed, that it was possible, that the sustainability of the fishery was a lot better, not just from an environmental sustainability, but probably from the stocks themselves. If there was support, if there was a grant, because I know they're very expensive to buy, if there was a grant towards purchasing them and support, do you think it would be possible to go back to something like that?
Anything is possible if fishermen support it. The reason we're sitting in this room today is partly because of the fishermen themselves. Okay? You used the word problem a minute ago. Problem is a word I don't like. The problem is something that's probably not solvable, all right? Fishermen are sitting here for the reason of solving a problem. You say, could we go back to the pot fishery? The reason the pot fishery was so successful back then was every avenue possible was available to people back in the 70s, all right? To protect the species we're looking at now, crayfish, okay? We introduced, department and with the help of Marine Institute and whatever else, a minimum landing size was introduced for a crayfish of 110 millimetres. For that crayfish to become 110 millimetres, he has to be 1 kilo weight. Okay? So if you go back to the fishery that was there in my father's time, his father before him, and the generations going back, they had access to everything. Okay? So you might have had a boat fishing 150 pots hauling them 4 times a day. All right? That was a 3-month fishery. All right? For the other 9 months of the year, he was entitled to fish every other species known to mankind.
Okay.
Now the problem we have as a fishery, okay, is if tomorrow morning this committee and the government and whoever else decided to ban this fishery on the strength of the report that they're reading there tomorrow morning, okay, the fishermen have no other, they've no other avenue. It's the only other fishery that's available to these guys. And if you take the guys that are fishing the nets out of it now and tell them they have to enter a pot fishery, okay, you're dumping effort, all right? I don't probably haven't the right words, but they're dumping effort into another fishery, okay? And they're going to make a fishery that's already has everybody within it. The numbers are going to increase.
You made your point.
Well, just because Chair, if I just another thing, just because I'm getting even worried. Setting aside the environmental issues, setting aside the species who, you know, the conservation problems with species or the vulnerability of those species, I always worry when I hear that there's such an amount of effort and I suppose reliance on a single species, because usually what that means is that that species could potentially be fished out over a number of years. Is that something that's a concern to you or to yourself, Oliver?
What you're pushing at there, Jennifer,
yeah.
If you keep introducing closure on another species, you're pushing us all the time then into what the only actual fishery that's left in is a pot fishery for us. We've been forced into that for the last how many years. We now have virtually a brown crab consultative committee that's trying to actually deal with that, trying to sort out a brown crab fishery. Like, there's an alternative here. Gus said it earlier. We have an alternative at the moment in being able to fish tangle nets for crayfish for a certain amount of time of the year. I think fishermen are making an awful huge effort here. Like as Eddie said, looking at a 4-month closure in a fishery, that's a huge effort. That's going to be. There's already a 20% decrease in the amount of brown crab we're catching. That's a significant loss in income. And I know Deputy. Pat said earlier about having a task force and stuff. It's fine having a task force. They're only short-term measures. If you keep taking away the fisheries we have, you're going to get rid of us completely.
Sorry, Oliver. Brief.
Sorry, just the word data has been used a number of times and there's been criticism of the way it's been presented. So if you looked for a piece of fishery science that had been undertaken in Ireland in the last 20 years that involved and integrated completely the fishing industry into that process, this is the project. Everybody in the room that is a fisherman in the room has been involved in reporting data under this project. Bycatch estimation is really difficult because it's really difficult to encounter rare events and to report on rare events. So you have to observe a lot and you have to monitor a lot. That was only possible by the involvement of fishermen in this process. So we have 800 trips over the last 4 years with observation data that has been reported directly to us by fishermen and that we present in the report. We're fully okay with the idea of estimation and raising and likelihood after that in terms of trying to estimate what the total fleet activity and the total fleet bycatch is because we have such a high level of reporting from those 800 trips. Now, if you don't like the word extrapolation or estimation, just look at the table for the 800 trips that is in the report. That's already pointing to significant problems with bycatch.
Okay. Deputy McLaughlin. Will I watch the clock? Deputy McLaughlin, and if you...
Yeah, thanks, Cahirla. I know that over a long time now, some of the frustration and anger of fishermen is that some people who are maybe independent or have represented environmental organisations, in my opinion, have used language that was provocative and demonising of fishermen unnecessarily. I have to say the last 2 sessions in here where we've had representatives of environmental groups, they haven't done that. and I think they've taken a responsible approach in one, like in marine protected areas. I thought it was a good session. I thought that we could find common ground, because I think Eddie put it most powerfully. It's not in your interest to have bycatch. There's no economic benefit to you from bycatch. You don't want to do it. So we need to work on a solution. So my mindset today is solution orientated, and to find common ground in all of our interests. Eddie, you talked about that in the work that you had done. You reduced the soakage time, and therefore there was no bycatch. Can I just get from Oliver, what's your sense of that? Was there a focus on Eddie's specific case study, and would that feed into the solution now in terms of a management plan?
Well, I mean, obviously Eddie's data has contributed to the report, as has the data from every other fisherman in the room. We couldn't disaggregate the data and report the data for each individual vessel in the report. That would be, we want to be anonymous, and we have to aggregate. We split the data between the Dingle and the Tralee fleets, because we knew there were differences in the bycatch profile and the species composition in the fishery generally in those two areas. We didn't disaggregate it any further than that. If we want to look at the effect of soak time on survivability, it's really a specific study and a different type of study if we want to get quantitative information.
Eddie has said today that he had no bycatch by reducing soak time. Is that true? Is that correct?
Well, I'd have to go back and look at Eddie's data, but if he says it's true, it's true.
My understanding internationally, when you reduce soakage time, that it does reduce bycatch. That's proven again and again internationally. So that appears to me to be an obvious area to focus on. Reduced fishing times seem to be an obvious area to focus on. My next question is, as far as it's been stated here today, and I absolutely agree with this, in terms of the razor fishery on the East Coast. I mean, what is going on in terms of management plans with the department? I mean, repeatedly I'm hearing from fishermen, they're being forced increasingly into, fishing predominantly shellfish, as inshore fishermen around our coast, and they're looking for management plans. They're looking for, it's absolutely in their interest to have a sustainable fishery so they continue to have a livelihood. So what's the approach of the department in driving forward with management plans with all the stakeholders around the table?
I can take that. Thank you. Brilliant. And thank you, Deputy McLaughlin. Just in terms of the razor clam and the northeast fishery specifically, in terms of that proposal, there has been quite, I suppose, a number of iterations of a proposal from the northeast RIF that would have come to the NIF at meetings in the past. The current proposal that has been developed was originated with the northeast RIF last July. And that proposal was shared amongst the various other RIFs, and it was agreed through the NIF just before Christmas to forward that to the department. So the department received that proposal in its current version, I think it was the 16th of January this year. So we've already spoken about the proposal with the meeting that we actually have a department and agencies, marine agencies meeting, and we've already discussed it preliminary, and we plan to discuss it further. So it's currently in progress.
Final supplementary question just in relation to the department. So the issue of quota management, I'm thinking here of mackerel, herring. I mean, you're increasingly pushing inshore fishermen, narrowly into certain species, and there's going to be management problems on an ongoing basis. Are you looking at the requests that they've had for a higher quota of the likes of mackerel, herring, to have options to have a sustainable future? As far as
just to say, I suppose on that, I guess in terms of quota management, the policy is as set out, and it would be a matter for the Minister to make a decision on any changes to the policy.
This is publicly owned resource. This belongs to all of us. You must have an opinion in terms of how you manage that quota and all of those species fairly to ensure that inshore fishermen can have a future. I mean, if you're just saying you can't have this, you can't have that, can't have that, and then, I mean, for one of the questions I would have in terms of the crayfish fishery, I mean, what are the vulnerabilities? Are there other species attacking the crayfish fishery? I just don't get a sense of who's joining up all of the pieces to make sure that you have a sustainable future.
I would just say in relation to the predation maybe of crayfish, I wouldn't have any knowledge of that. I don't know if the MI want to
Maybe the
comment, or
inshore fishermen might answer that.
Could I just interrupt?
Yeah, of course, Cahirley. Yeah.
Any of you any objections to Deputy Whitmore? And any of you have, stay silent. So just to thank all of you for your contribution. I'm sorry I have to leave, but I thought it was most interesting to hear from all of you. And the one thing I can say that everybody spoke and they were totally genuine and expressing their views, and we'll decide possibly at a private session what we'll do at a later stage.
Actually, forgot when you spoke. Oh, sorry, excuse me.
The chair.
Oh, sorry, excuse me. I thought you were leaving, sorry.
Okay, so I'm not sure where we are. I think
we've just finished.
That one's just finished.
Dr. Payne was looking to respond to.
Okay, Dr. Payne, if you want to come in.
I just had a question. Because of the change at Cahirley, that might have been
Okay,
lost.
so,
Just in terms of the cray fishery itself, because I mean, obviously, you're looking at reduced season, you're looking at reduced soakage time. I mean, are there other threats to the crayfish species that are there that we need to be looking at too, that you're aware of?
When we're talking about the management plan that we're proposing to put forward, I heard somebody saying something a little while ago about regard to the soak time. Fishermen have also asked to put forward the fact that to control the soak time, you need to know the amount of gear you actually have in the water that's workable to actually work with a particular soak time to put that into place. And also, I think somebody said a little earlier about weather. I think weather and stuff like that are a big factor, which they are. Okay, but in the particular way we use the fishery, if the forecast is bad for a particular period of time, the gear stays in the stern. It's not actually dumped out because, secondly, fishermen can't actually afford, okay, to damage gear, and the gear gets damaged, particularly by storms, because of the ground we work on and the height of the ground and the depth and everything else. If a storm comes and you have something in shallow water, you will actually damage the gear. So it's in the fisherman's best interest to actually bring the gear ashore. So if you have the correct amount of gear in the water, that in itself pleases soak time. It's no good telling somebody you can haul your gear, you're going to work a soak time and you have X amount of gear and it takes X amount of days. So again, that's another thing. But everything here is coming from fishermen. And if there's something needed here, I can guarantee you one thing: fishermen won't be wanted.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Nick Payne want to come in first, and then I'll come back to yourself.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, just just to quickly comment on the common ground issue. I think one thing that's really clear is to highlight that fishermen aren't the problem here. Like the Irish fishing community are working within a system of insufficient management. They're not just playing by the rules, but they're actually very actively engaging in data collection to help us understand the bycatch problem. And they're even more than that, they're also proposing potential solutions. One solution, stepping outside the context of crayfish, is the recent proposal for income stabilisation. And like, we read that recently and we're very supportive of a lot of those measures. I think not just financial supports, but also opening up of other fisheries, equity in terms of quota of other fisheries, including things like bluefin tuna. I work on bluefin tuna, and I think it's one of the best managed fisheries in the world. Irish fishing community has been asking for a quota for Ireland for years. My understanding is there's been no progress. I don't understand it. I think it's a very, very positive thing that the Irish fishing community could seek. And I think the frustration we have, it's not with fishing community because they're not the problem. It's the lack of progress by government, in my opinion, and particularly support for transitioning away from some of these practices to more sustainable ones. They need to be supported, and they need to be supported quickly. This has been going on for like decades.
I'm just going to go to Eamon first.
I was just going back to Pádraig's thing about pots and the net difference between them. Like crayfish sit, as Eddie said, are already on small, spiky ground. Those areas are quite small. You put a couple of short a short string of nets in there just to target the crayfish. That's all you do. If you were to fish that area with pots, but you cannot fish pots like that. Pots are set 10, 12 fathom apart. If if all of us here alone went fishing pots tomorrow for crayfish in an area, there'd be just bedlam. It's very hard to do that. It's very easy when you have very small amounts of nets just come in and you target the area, you pick out where you want, you shoot your gear there. You cannot do that with pots. You will saturate the area if you try doing that with pots. That's just a fact.
Gallard's Donegal Cancer flights for the Minister for Transport, so I'm very sorry that I have to leave.
No problem. It's just me and you now, David. I'm just going to go to Damien behind you, and then I'll come back to you, Edward.
Thanks. It's struck me all morning that this is probably the most data we have for angel shark in Ireland at the moment, and it's come via bycatch. So in one sense, it's almost welcome that there's more angel shark than we actually thought out there, but obviously there's a massive downside. Just to go back to Deputy McLaughlin, he was talking about bycatch. We have a very good issue for bycatch mortality globally from tangle nets, gill nets and other, like beach protection in Australia, for instance. And there's massive differences across species. They're not all the same. Like your classic sort of fusiform shark, like the taupe, for instance, is a lot more vulnerable than some of the benthic species. They'll survive for longer. But even species like, for instance, Thornback ray and cuckoo ray are largely similar size with similar life history, but vastly different post-release survival. So what we're missing is data, I think, on some of these, and it's already been referred to. But for the angel shark, for the flapper skate, post-release survival, we just don't have that information. A lot of information we do have on these species is based on fisheries independent surveys and fisheries data, and that doesn't cover the entire coastline very well necessarily. And I think the flapper skate is something I could maybe speak a bit more on, because we're studying that species along the south coast in particular, in Cork-MacSharry Bay, where we have a great relationship with the local community there, including the fishing community. They're very invested in the project, and I'd go so far as to say there's an element of co-creation there. And again, it's not tangle netting, it's some gill netting. They don't want to catch they don't want to catch flapper skate either. But I think this conversation has very much been about the southwest of Ireland, and there's a massive efforts now in tangle netting all along the south coast as well. If I read the report correctly, almost the same quantity as coming into Dingle and Tralee. And that is really important habitat for the flapper skate. And I suppose my last point is we're talking about a lot about having the fishermen adopt different measures. And a key missing point here is understanding the animal's actual ecology, where they go, how long they spend there, their residency times, because these are things we need to understand to help manage our activities. And if we don't understand those first, it's very hard to come up with good solutions.
I forgot to actually make to yourself when you were asking me about the actual fishery then versus now. One of the main problems we've had here as fishermen, is we've been too trustworthy. We accepted that there was an issue with the salmon fishery 20 odd years ago. We were told it would be reviewed in 10 years' time. We're 23 years on, and we're still waiting for a review, and we're still waiting for somebody to say that fishermen were not the problem here. We were blamed back then for a problem with the salmon fishery, and here we are 23 years later, and nobody seems to give a whistler as to the fact that the fishermen are excluded from taking part in another fishery. So that's probably one of the key issues there. And I'm happy to hear what this man is saying behind me there as well. But also, a key part of this moving forward is funding. I think you made that point yourself there a little earlier. And you made a point, I think, in the last year or so yourself as well, as to the importance of fishermen to rural Ireland. I thought it was a very, very good point to put forward. I don't think we actually realise ourselves the importance that we are to. I think the point you used was that fishermen and the tourists come in to see fishermen. They see their importance to rural Ireland. So this whole issue can be resolved, I believe, quite quickly if people are prepared to go in, sit down in a room, or wherever they want to go and discuss this. They'll find that fishermen won't be found wanting.
Thank you very much. Now, Deputy Maxwell but John wants to come in, so I'm not sure. Are you raising a different issue?
No.
So, John, if you want to come in and then...
Just on your question you asked, is there a problem with the the crayfish fishery. There's not a problem with the crayfish fishery, in my opinion. We have the largest crayfish size in Europe. To answer your question, no, there's not a problem. Could we do it better? Absolutely. Anything can be done better. That's just one point. And just on another point, when we talk about the unknowns around angel sharks, that's one of three I caught in one day where I fish. I've told Ollie about it before in the past. He's asked me where I caught them. I will not say where I caught them. 3 were released alive. There's no issue. They're fine where they are. They don't need protection. So there is a big, and there's going to be a bigger mistrust going forward between fishermen and scientists, because there's angel sharks. I fish Oireachtas. I cover a massive area, so he's not going to know where I got them. They don't need protection because there's very little fishing effort in that area. But how do I get that data? As when you see on telly, when you get arrested in America, anything you say can and will be used against you. If I say, I know where there's a load of them, then they'll come in and blanket ban and cover anything when they're quite happy where they are. It's like when we see when new roads are getting built and next thing there's a snail or a flower. Those things are all over the place. It's just when they happen to be found in one individual place, then they have to be protected and everything else changes. So to say, I'm sure they are endangered and everything else, but the data of them is that limited and it's only based on what fishermen are providing. So therefore, the fishermen are catching them all. I don't think is correct. I seen one survey online where one was tagged in Tralee Bay and it was recaptured in the Bay of Biscay. Now, how many tangle nets are fished off the west coast of Ireland by other EU vessels along the habitat of these endangered species? But it's only that, as we often see, as we see with the mackerel this year, it's always the Irish fishermen that have to suffer for the so-called protection of a species when we don't even know it's the Irish fishermen that are causing the problem.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just go to Deputy Maxwell now, if you want to ask another question, Deputy.
Look, I suppose we're not 100 miles apart here. Like fishermen, they want to do what they've been doing for generations, go out and make a living, but make it in a sustainable way. I don't know fishermen who would tell you, she'll fish it all now in the next 3 or 4 years and we'll take what we can and forget about, okay? The fishermen have come up with 8 alternatives. This is to the department people and the people at the top row, 8 alternatives. So there's the defined seasonal fishery, the V-notching of the buried crayfish, the controlled soak times, reduced fishing effort, development of a pot fishery, gear modification, continuing on board monitoring, and targeted funding to allow fishermen. Is there any of them that the top row don't agree with, or like, can we as a committee work with those, bring them up the line and see, can we work over the next couple of years in what the fishermen have come up with themselves to try and make this more sustainable? Is there any of them parts, or what's the view on those 8 suggestions that the fishermen themselves have brought forward?
I can, well, do you want to go ahead first, or? I can make a few points just on some issues, like specifically around the critically endangered species. I think I did already make this point that, you know, they can't withstand any level of bycatch, and unfortunately with, you know, with reducing soak times and stuff, like that is something that would be great, but I think it would be very hard to manage that and to make sure that that occurs in all these areas. Like how would it be managed and monitored and made sure that soak times were kept at a low level? And then with like spatial closures as well, like there is already closures to tangle nets within Tralee Bay, but all of the catches of angel sharks happened outside of this area. Same with flapper skates as well. They are moving around, and unfortunately they do cross over into the crayfish fishing grounds. So my main concern is really these critically endangered species and how they can be protected. And I don't think that any of these management measures sufficiently address that. The V-notching and stuff is a great management measure to help make sure that the crayfish fishery is sustainable, but I'm not sure how these measures would help with the critically endangered species.
Okay, yeah. That's one Okay,
yeah, sure.
go ahead.
Yeah, and look, I think the proposing of solutions is really helpful. I guess on the winter closure, a concern would be what level of bycatch that will effectively mitigate against. I don't have data on fishing effort through winter. I don't have data on bycatch rates during winter. You know, the reports, bycatch is almost 100% of catches are between like April and say November. So that's the period of concern that we have in front of us in terms of evidence.
Okay.
If there's the same amount of fishing effort and the same amount of bycatch over winter, then a winter closure would be great. But I just don't have those data. So maybe this is another discussion.
And I'm going to go to Oliver. So Oliver, then Eamon, then Carol.
And I just want back in.
Okay, and two lads here in front.
Just very quickly, I mean, it is really positive that there are 8 proposals on the table, that we don't have a blank sheet here, but each of those needs to be discussed in much greater detail with the industry. I mean, there are nuances and contexts, feasibility, all of that has to be discussed in each of those measures.
Okay, thank you. Eamon, do you want to come in?
Just going back to Grace's point there. Look, and obviously any type of management you bring in to enforce it is always going to be important. But I think the best people sometimes to enforce any management are the actual fishermen themselves. You know, if there's something that we're all abiding by, then everybody does that. Without the buy-in of the industry, that's going to be almost impossible. But if you have the buy-in from us, that's always doable then.
Okay. Carol?
I suppose in response to the 8 measures, we just haven't seen those yet. So they'd come into us and they'd go for discussions, the department and agencies inshore group, which Geraldine referred to earlier. So we just get the technical input from BIM, we get scientific input from the MI, and we get, I suppose, the control. If there's any control issues, we get the input there from SFPA. So we'd absolutely welcome them and could review them.
So the 2 fishermen want to come in. Do you want to, and then you can come back in, yeah? Yeah.
Okay.
Michael, do you want to?
Yeah, I think there's a huge elephant in the room here that Norman's touching. Like, all those lads in the gallery that I have spoken to is disagreeing with the data. They're disagreeing with it, like the fellas that took part. Now, I didn't take part in this survey, but I am fishing my entire life. I fished an 18-metre boat with tanglets at Turbot and Monk, and that's what we got, was turbot and monk and maybe the odd skate. When I fished for crayfish in an 11-metre boat, we shot in peaks, and you got the odd pollock with the crayfish. We didn't see all this skate, but if you moved into the sand, then you'd catch skate and flappers and whatever else was there. But, like, one of the lads pointed this out to me there this morning. In 2021, the estimates for angel shark was 0. And then the estimates for 2022 was 56. Like, how? Like, how is that? Could you explain that, Adam?
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the other question, and then I'll allow Oliver to come back in and just go through that data. Michael?
Yeah, it's just about the season. 3/4 of the angel shark we ever caught was in March. So the season would actually get rid of a lot of it, yeah, if it was closed until April.
Okay. All right, thank you. And David, do you want to?
Yeah, right. So mixed reviews from the top bench there on these proposals. And I suppose, Carol, you said you hadn't seen, they're brand new. So look, before we make any decision, can we ask that maybe you go and look at these proposals? For me, I'm sure there's 8 proposals there. There's probably, I'm sure when they're looked into, some mightn't be workable. That's in everything. But let's try and work with the fishermen. They've came up with 8 proposals. Maybe there's some more they can come up with. Let's try and work with them and try and protect the species, all that we have no bycatch, and see can we work and arrive at a sustainable solution. Like, there's no point in us sitting here and saying, well, this isn't going to work, this isn't going to work, and this isn't going to work, without any looking at it. So what I'm saying here, both sides need to go away, spend whatever, a couple of months, and before someone comes back and says we don't have months, this is time critical. Well, it's been going on for the last generations. I'm sure another 6 months isn't going to make a massive amount of difference. And let's come together and work together and see, can we come up? And if we come back, and I propose that we come back here in 6 months or 7 and see, can we? And if we can't reach agreement, well, that's we've gone that far. But that gives you, Carol, and your team a chance to look at these proposals and work. Like, the fishermen themselves are telling you they want to work with you, they want to try and deliver. I'm sure in all those, there's something might be unworkable. I'm not a fisherman. You might come back and say, that's unworkable. That's fair. But let's try and work together over the next 6 months and see, can we arrive at a consensus that gives the fishermen a livelihood, but also protects the critically endangered species that need to be protected and other fish. That's what I would propose, Chair, that we give both sides 6 months to come back and we reassemble here and see, can we agree something. Like, to me, the fishermen seem like we've all been, and no side has any solution. And you'll say, well, what's your solution to that? And, well, the fishermen are coming with solutions here. Let's work and see, can we make them deliver.
Okay, Carol, are you okay with that? So 6 months reconvening, and if you provide us with the information, like if there's proposals on the table, is there a consultation as part of that that's wider than the? Well, that would.
Do we need 6 months? Will it be 4 months? You let me know. I just picked 6 months. It's a random figure. If we can do it in 4 or do it in 6, but you.
I suppose we just have to see what's involved first and kind of the level of input we'd need. And yeah, I would say if there's going to be policy changes, it would go to consultation. It's just, it takes a bit of time.
Okay, so I think 4 months seems to be a good compromise, and it'll just bring that sort of little bit of urgency to it. So if that was okay, and then we can move along with that. I do want to give Oliver an opportunity, though, because I think there's been.
So if it's 4 months, it's either July or September, because we're in recess in August. So
July.
Let's pick July. Is that, or do you want to go for September?
No,
yeah.
Are you happy enough?
We can see what we can get done. It's just, it
Well, I'd
depends what we
propose
see.
provisional date in July,
Yeah.
Chair.
We can certainly come back and see and state where we are in July. That's no problem. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And I do want to give Oliver an opportunity to talk to the points that were made.
Briefly, the data in the report is as per the data reported to us by fishermen and by scientific observers on board the boats.
Okay.
But how could we an estimate for zero in 2021, and then the estimate for 2022 is 56? What has that got to do with, like, where did that estimate come from? How could something go from 0 to 56? Like, that's what I can't get my head around. Like,
Bycatch events are rare, and there's a chance element, obviously, especially for species like angel shark, which are in extremely low numbers. So yeah, you can get 0, and another year you can get something else.
but what changed in 2021 to 2022? That if your estimates were 0 in 21, what changed that made you estimate 56 in 2022? Like, I can't get my head around that. Like.
Well, do you mean in that year we got 0 reported to us in 2022?
Were angel sharks targeted for as part of it to tag or anything?
No.
Nothing at all?
No.
Was the second study much more extensive?
Well, the study from 2021 to 2024 involves direct observation of 800 fishing trips. That's where the numbers come from. Above and beyond that, there's estimated total fleet-wide catch. The estimates are estimates. The observed data is the observed data.
Okay. So that is based on what was actually caught, the observed data at that point.
Something big changed, so like that if there was no angel sharks in 21 and there was a lot of them caught in 2022, like if they're this scarce, where did they all come? Like if a creature is critically endangered and they weren't expecting to see any of them, and then the following year, oh, look at them all now. Like what? Did something cause that?
So no, actually maybe tides or something, I'm not sure.
I mean, there's always huge variation. Well, I'm sure I don't have to tell the fishing community that there's variation in all species fished. The angel shark, unfortunately, we don't know a lot about its ecology. A lot of what we do know is based on the Pacific angel shark. But in the North Atlantic, in the Northeast Atlantic, there's only small remnant population. So it is possible, just as Ollie said, on the basis of pure chance, that you would get a small number of individuals in one year and none in another year. And it could also depend on if there were slight changes in the fishing effort, weather or whatnot. I mean, there's so many confounding factors. It's very hard to come up with a good answer, unfortunately. But there's always natural variation, and these are quite small numbers, and it doesn't surprise me to see them as an ecologist. And I know that maybe that's not a great answer or not a very satisfying answer, but it's probably the best one we have.
Yeah, Michael, it's not as if we found hundreds of them the following year. We still only found a very low number. You know, I mean, it's not that surprising, really. And the estimates, you know, for the overall level of depletion of angel shark in Irish waters is in excess of 95% in the last, 50 years. It's really, really depleted.
5 seconds, and then I'm going to have to close.
Yeah, just a very brief comment is a lot of these animals do aggregate. They aggregate in groups, and there is some thought that angel sharks in Tralee Bay are aggregating for mating. So that would often see you get 0, 0, 0, and then a lot because they've come together to reproduce. So patchiness in these kind of animals is actually common. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to have to close.
Can I just one quick question? Because there seems to be a lot of focus on the angel shark, and there seems, I don't want to put words into anybody's mouth, but there seems from critically endangered species side that one death is too many. Could I just ask one question? Do seals eat angel sharks? Because we have a large amount of seals here, right next to a bay that has a population of angel sharks. Is it possible that seals eat angel sharks, and do angel sharks need protection from seals?
So data from the Fisheries Board, IFI now, was looked at a recreational catch and release program over 60 years or something like that. Like 50, 60 years, I think, of angel sharks. It was based around Tralee Bay. Catches of angel sharks then were, I think we're now around like less than 10% of what were being captured back then. So the population declines of angel sharks has probably been 90%. So
seals have increased 100%. Angel sharks have decreased.
Not in the blaskets, though.
Not at the. I mean,
No, it's probably 100% in the blaskets. 100%. Wait till you get.
In the blaskets, it was the results showed that actually that the population was being impacted severely.
Talk to National Parks and Wildlife this week.
80% increase in the 2009-2012 survey. 80% increase in the Blasket Islands, and that's actual data for pups.
Okay, so I'm just going to very quickly, Ollie, if you can just respond to that, and then we have to close off because I have gone over.
Population of seals in the Blasket Islands is increasing. I mean, you can see that, but it's not a closed population. There's migration into the Blasket Island population from France, from Britain, so it's a much more open population. Our risk assessment in 2016 said that if you had that bycatch in a closed population, that population would be at risk. It's not closed, it's open, but it's relying on...
Do seals eat, could seals eat angel sharks? Because we've seen an increase in the seals and a decrease in the angel sharks in a small area.
We're going to finish.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Fair. So look, I want to thank everyone to come in. It was a very interesting conversation, actually, and I do hope, and I think there's a pathway for everyone to work together and to come up with a solution on this issue, because I do think it's really, really important that we get this addressed. I think it's been an issue for far too long, and I do want to see some level of resolution to it. As there are no further matters for discussion. It will be coming back, yeah. As there are no further matters for discussion, today's meeting of the Joint Committee stands adjourned until the 3rd of March 2026. The Select Committee will meet tomorrow, 25th, at 6:30. Thank you.